Hello everyone. So I hope you are all doing well. So we are going to do some data analysis. So this is an introduction course. So we are going to analyze some COVID-19 data, the one I have here on my GitHub. So I'll leave the link on the description below so that you can access the data and the notebook code. So I'm going to use Google Colab. So we are going to download the data using the URL retrieve module in Python. So let's start. So this is in this cell we are downloading the data. So from URL library dot request import URL retrieve. So after that, so we'll need a variable name to store the URL of our data. So italy COVID URL, that is the variable name. We pass it as a string. So I already copied the link. So this is the link, the one we have here. So what we do here is now we use the URL retrieve to get the file that we want, this one. So I'll copy the file name. So URL retrieve is a takes two parameters, that is the variable name and the file name. So the variable name is this one. We separate them by the comma, and we have the file name. We store it as a string. So it takes two parameters. So at this point we can run the cell to download the file. So as you can see, it executes. So this means we already downloaded the file. So in this second cell we are going to use pandas to get information about the data that we have. So pandas is a Python library that is used for data analysis. So import pandas as pd, and then we have to read the file using pandas. So we'll need another variable. Let's call it like that, is equals to pd dot. We use this function read csv. So csv means comma separated values. So it is a file that is delimited. It is a file that has a delimited text file that uses a comma to separate values. So at this point we pass in the file that we want to read, and we pass it as a string. So we already copied the file name, italy COVID-19. So after reading the file, we can check the type of the file. So we pass in the variable name. So let us run the cell. So you can see we are able to read the file. So we have the date, new case, new death, and new test, just as the file appears here. And even when you open it using Microsoft Excel, this is what you'll get. So we can represent this information in terms of graph. So when we click here, suggested charts, will be able to represent this information. So as you can see, we have the information represented in terms of graph. So we have the 2D distributions, time series of new cases against death, new deaths against date. So this is the data represented in form of a graph, and you can download these graphs for your work. Just right click and click here, save images, and you will be able to store these images. So don't worry about this. This is the Python code that displays the graphs. So we'll learn about NumPy in our next course. I was just introducing you to what we can do using Python, pandas for data science. So I'll clear the output. So in our next cell, we are going to view information about the data. So what we'll do here is we use the info. So we use the info method to get some information about the data. So you can see we have the information about the data. The data has 248 entries, 0 to 247. We have total of 4 columns. You can see from the output here. So in our next cell, what we are going to do here is, let's say you want to get the mean, standard deviation, minimum and maximum values, and number of empty values. So what we are going to use here is, we are going to use the describe method so I'll write the same code just as this one, but in this case we are going to use the .describe method like this, and then when we execute, we can see now we have the information about the data. We have the mean of the new cases, mean of the new deaths, and mean of the new test. We have the counts of the total values. We have the standard deviation, minimum and maximum values, and the percentages. So this is a summary of the information we have concerning the data. So we can represent all that in form of graph. So this is the information represented in terms of graphs. So we have the distributions, the frequency of new cases, new deaths, and new tests, and we have the values. You can see we have represented the information in graphs, the 2D distribution. So you can as well download these graphs. You just right click and you save the image. So that is the code, the NumPy code that displays the graphs. We'll go through all of this in our next video. So this is a simple data analysis using Python. So you can see we have analyzed that data, we have represented it in form of graph. So in my next video I'll talk about all these methods, the describe, the shape, to understand more on this data analysis methods using pandas. So up to that point, I hope you've grasped something, and now you have what data science is, and how you can analyze the data, you can represent the information. So the importance of this data analysis is that you can use this data to predict the future trend. As we can see these graphs, you can, from this graph you can analyze what is most likely to happen in the near future. So up to that point, let's meet in our